Hi guys, and welcome to AirAbility, your regular dose of lead therapy. And today is going to be another one of my Shifu's Commandments videos, and we're going to be talking about what behaviours you need to encompass when you're training. Remember, a Shifu is a master or a teacher, especially in a martial arts context. And one of my subscribers called me that, and I think it's quite funny and a fantastic name for a series of videos, but I don't view myself as one. I'm just trying to help people shoot better at 25-meter air rifle bench rest and enable them to enjoy the sport more. So what I'm going to share with you today are a handful of behaviours that I try to encompass when I go to train, and therefore these help deliver me to the line at a competition in the best shape possible, enable me to perform the best I can. So you will see nothing new here, but the hard part is remembering to do it when you're training. So number one is practice with a purpose. Now, you might say, well, I practice to get better to win. What I mean is practice with a purpose, an individual attribute of your shooting each time you practice. And what I mean by that is, for instance, when I practice, I will make it, let's say, trigger control day. So I make sure that I do everything as I should, and I, concentrate on all the aspects of my shooting as usual, but I try to emphasize one area of my shooting to try and make it better. So on trigger control day, I'll be especially thinking about pulling that trigger back in a linear fashion, understanding where the break point is on the trigger to make sure that I release the shot at the right time. And then maybe the next day I'll have a whole day where I'll be practicing floating the gun, like in my other videos. And then maybe on another day, I'll be practicing visualizing my wind flags or shooting in the wind. If you practice with a purpose, 50 shots can be more valuable than people who just shove 500 shots down the lane like an automaton without any real purpose. I really believe that if you practice with a purpose and concentrate on one attribute of your shooting each time you go out training, you can really make the best of what limited training time we all have with work and family, etc. Practice as you compete. Well, to be honest, this sounds quite obvious, but you need to make sure that when you set up for practice, that the wind flags are the same, you're using exactly the same equipment on the bench, that everything is set out in the same way that you would in a competition. So when you're in a competition, everything is familiar and there's no surprises. This might take a little bit more effort when you are practicing, but it really pays dividends, because when you get to a competition, you just feel like you're at home in your own living room and you feel very comfortable, and it's one less thing you've got to worry about. And to be honest, when I practice as I compete, I also try to wear similar clothing as I would when I compete, because it's no point in wearing a t-shirt and practicing and then turning up to an event and wearing a puffer jacket where your hold and everything is going to be different. So if you know it's going to be cold, do practice in some more clothing. If you know it's going to be hot, practice in what you think the required clothing will be of the day. And this really does pay dividends, because you're not trying to bend the way you shoot around changing your layout or your clothing on the day. Now here is a rule that I absolutely die by. Training is a time for you to alter the settings on your rifle, your scope, fiddle with your ammunition, do your ammo prep, find out what is the best combination of ammo prep, what's the best ammo for your gun, etc., etc. But there's one thing that people do which really confuses them. They change 2 or 3 things at a time. They might lube, they might size the pellets, they might change the speed on the rifle, they might even put new stocks or new equipment on the rifle. And they might do 2, 3, 4, 5 things at once. And then sometimes the rifle gets worse, if not better. And you can't, because you've done so many things at once, you can't track it down to the one thing you've done that's made things worse. So my biggest advice is, if you're mixing things up in training, which is part of training, do one thing at a time so you can backtrack if it doesn't work and you know exactly what you've done. Now, write everything down. This comes straight in from the changing one thing at a time. If you write it down, you know what you've done, you know what worked, you know what didn't work. Also, write down how well your training session went. What was good about it? What was bad about it? Is there anything you think you can improve the next time? Your mind doesn't remember things as clearly as you believe. Sometimes it puts a more positive spin on what's actually happened and you think everything's great. So, several people through my shooting life have always said, coaches, esteemed coaches who really know what they're on about, one of the most important things about shooting and shooting well is write everything down. And when you go to a competition as well, write down what the conditions were, how you felt, how you shot, etc. So you can, acclimatize yourself to that venue next time you go more quickly. It really is boring writing everything down, but if you create a shooting journal, it really does pay dividends. Don't take shortcuts. This comes straight in, as part of the practice as you compete, way of going about things. I see so many people on the internet who say, I only took 2 win flags today and not 3. I only needed 2. And things like that. Or I didn't bother sizing my ammo. It doesn't make much difference. I will do when I'm in competition. And things like that. What is the point of practicing to be serious, to be good, to be the best you can, and cut yourself off at the knees and only give yourself half a chance of doing that by not actually doing what you should be doing? Shortcuts are absolutely the right way to go about limiting what you get out of training. So remember, don't take shortcuts and practice as you compete. What happens in training stays in training. No, we're not in Las Vegas doing naughty things, but you need to think about it that way, because when you're training, you could have a bad day and things not go right, and it could be, a short amount of time before a competition. You don't take that mentality to a competition, because you're just gonna, again, not help yourself with your optimum performance. You've got to understand that training and competition are different, and your reason for training is to get to a competition. And if you're going to do the bad stuff and not be so good, and probably not be on your best form, to do it in training is actually a good time, and that's why we train. But even more dangerous than taking a bad training session in your head to a competition is taking a good training session to a competition. And you might go into your favorite field or your gun club a couple of days before the competition and shoot like an absolute ninja and believe that you're invincible. And that is the worst thing as well. You've got to remember that training is only an indication of the possibilities for when you go to a shooting competition. It's not going to have a direct reflection, and you have got to basically deliver the goods on the day and go in there, like I've said with, Shifu's competition commandments. Go to your competition and try as hard as you possibly can right to the end. Don't think about what you were doing in training and I did well and I deserve this and I did that, or I did poorly and I'm not going to do well today. A competition is a new day and treat it as such. Timing is key. And what do I mean about that? Well, you can't tell me that every athlete in history is able to perform their best on a random Tuesday afternoon during the week. No, what they do is they train with a goal in mind, with an event in mind. So their performance peaks at the right time. And that's what we've got to do. And you can only do this through experience of what type of training works best for you, through writing it all down to see what type of training works best for you and able to remind yourself without any confusion. And what I do is I try to increase my level of training up to a few days before an event, and then I have a little break so I'm fresh, I'm eager, and I'm keen to shoot when I get to the tournament. Now, our tournaments can be quite a few months apart, and there are two types of training. There's like keeping your hand in, there's kind of training on various attributes of how you shoot, and also training to make sure that your gear and your pellets and all your settings, etc., are optimal. And that's great. And you can do that really at the beginning of your training cycle is the best time for that. And then when you get into the last couple of weeks when training intensifies and you're trying to get to the range more often, you need to be concentrating on the finer attributes of your shooting. And then in the final section of your training, you really need to be trying to find those conditions that are going to be similar to where you shoot. And then you can start trying to, do those high scores and see if you are going to be in a situation where you're going to be able to compete. But we don't always have all the time in the world. You know what I mean? Things come and give us a bit of a bump in life. And what I think about training is if you train with a purpose and you time your run correctly, even a smaller amount of training that isn't quite optimal will pay good results for you. Guys, there's nothing new there, is there? But as I said before, it's about remembering these attributes, these behaviors when you're training. In future videos, I might break these down and do a video on each of these attributes depending on what people want. But it's all about thinking about how you're going to train, making sure you're considered in your approach. You record what you do, and you don't randomly change things without making sure that you know what you've done and you know how to backtrack. And remember, what happens in training stays in training. Don't get cocky, but equally as important, don't get disheartened if things aren't going well. If you try your best on the day, good things can happen. Until next time, remember guys, you keep living the airgun dream and take care.